What's up, everybody? Margie here, and I want to welcome you to my channel, 827. In my very first video, we're going to talk about DNA testing, the correct way to read a test, and how it goes hand in hand with genealogy or your family tree. My focus today is going to be on Black Americans and the current identity crisis we have going on right now. You know, we got celebrities saying we American Indians, we Hebrews, we Moors. You got American Negroes saying we Africans. So which one is it exactly, and how do we prove it? So first, let's talk about why Kanye, Waka, and others are saying these things. It's called epigenetics. Now, I'm not going to go too deep in it on this video, but basically, our DNA stores 12 to 15 generations of history. So we literally are our ancestors. Start asking questions. What has your family told you about your people? All my life, I've been told my maternal side is Creek, Cherokee, Irish, and Kenyan. That foundation will help better understand the DNA results and how it proves we are everything we say we are. Moving on. So what is DNA? DNA is the genetic material that's stored in your chromosomes. So you get half your chromosomes from your mom and half from your dad. When you take an ancestry test, you're taking it to find your relatives. That's important to know because the companies can only get 0.01% of your genetic material from your sample. So that's why they say you should test multiple family members, especially the silent generation and the boomers. The best companies, in my opinion, is Ancestry because that's the only company that actually tells you how to read a test. And MyHeritage because it's a swab test for the elders who can't spit in a tube. Side note, Ancestry has all Southeast Woodland Indigenes classified as African American communities. So let's get into this test. When you get your results, the very first message is your ethnicity estimate may include two sorts of results. Results with the solid circle indicate distant origins 500 to 1,000 years ago. Results with the broken circle indicate more recent origins 50 to 300 years ago. Now keep this in mind because that's the only time you're going to see this message. From there, you want to go down to your DNA by parent, click on Chromosome Painter, scroll down to the facts, and go to how can I use this information? And it says, with this data, you can get a general feel for how recent your connections are to your regions. The longer a segment, a single colored block, i.e. the percentage is for a region, the more recent your connection to that region may be. Now that we read these facts, we now know how to read the test. We know that you want to start from the bottom or the ancient origins to the top or the most recent origins. So let's take a look at one of my elders' results. Remember my family history from earlier? The first thing I was told was I'm American Indian. There is no way a so-called African American should have ancient American DNA if we all came from the slave trade 400 years ago. The percentage should be higher, like that of a third or fourth great grandparent if that was the case. As you can see here, the ancient DNA is Mesoamerican. I'm not going to go into deep here, but quickly, the Creek Indians came from the South, and we still got people there, but that's another video for another day. 85% of us are indeed indigenous to the Americas, and we'll get to those intricate details later. Next, we have West Asian DNA. West Asia includes Cyprus, Israel, Jordan, Lebanon, Palestine, Iraq, and etc. Aren't the Hebrews the ancient Semitic people from West Asia or the Middle East? Doesn't Hebrew literally mean beyond or across? If you've done your family tree, how many Hebrew names have you come across? Names like Abraham, Elijah, Seth, Zechariah, Israel, just to name a few. You're finding these names because to be an indigenous American is to be a Hebrew. Don't shoot the messenger, but it's in our DNA and the ancestors are speaking. Now that the ancient DNA is out the way, and don't worry, I'm going to come back to the claim I just made shortly. Next is Scandinavian. I was told my great grandmother's grandfather was Irish, but after doing my genealogy and finding his first ancestors to come to the Americas, they were Nordic Quaker colonizers that married into a few of my indigenous bloodlines to grab land and resources when they first got to Virginia, and as they made their way down the East Coast, much like the Ashkenazis did the Hebrews. They married the women to reap the benefits of the land and the resources. And to prove it, here's another one of my elders' tests. Instead of it saying West Asian, it says Ashkenazi Jewish. Moving along is the Kenyan DNA my great grandmother always said we had. She says her great grandmother came from what's now known as Kenya. She never said we was a whole continent. We all come from a people. Now that we're making our way up to the end of the test, next we have West African, which is a vast area, but I've done my family tree and I know that my grandmother's paternal great-great-grandfather was enslaved as a brick mason on the Orange Hill plantation in St. Vincent. Back then, there was only two classifications for the enslaved: Creole, or a person from the Americas, and African. It's all documented. My ancestor was a Muslim who brought his freedom in the early 1820s and came to the mainland. How do I know he was Muslim? Because when he had a son shortly after he came to South Carolina, he named him Isam, which is Arabic for safety and protection. He would be classified as a Moor, which was a term generally used by Europeans to describe Muslims, including those with dark skin. Putting all this together, I concluded he came from Mali, as we can see in another one of my people's results, as well as all of my cousins from his bloodline that we have the same Mali instead of the general West African tag. We have to take a pause quickly before we go over these last two results to talk about the American Colonization Society and how in the late early 1800s, Thomas Jefferson and them wanted to rid the colonies of the free people of color, which, once you do your genealogy, you will find majority of your people were in fact classified as colored and majority were absolutely free and indeed of America. They chose to be colored instead of giving up their ancestral lands. So where did they want to send us? Sierra Leone, a British colony, said no, which led them to form Liberia. In their minds, it was to make some sort of retribution for all the crimes committed against the indigenes and wanted American Negroes to introduce to the Aborigines of West Africa the arts of cultivated life and the blessing of civilization and science. So with the help of a few liberal missionaries, American Negroes went to colonize the indigenous people for land and money, named their towns after the Americas, called themselves Americos and Creole, and are still there, as well as other West African countries like Nigeria and Ghana. All so-called African Americans will have results from these countries specifically and are all classified as Nigerians, as we can see here. Let's take a look at what they call African American communities. Now remember, these results are more recent origins, 50 to 300 years ago, precisely when the colonizers started to win the wars against the indigenous Negro people like the Tuscarora and Yamasee. Let's go down to Ancestral Journeys and click on the first one, early North Carolina and the Deep South. You can take a moment to read while I go to the nationalparkservice.gov to discuss a lot of facts left out. No one wants to talk about how many of the early enslaved were American Indians, mostly from coastal Virginia and North Carolina, but not limited to Pennsylvania, Massachusetts, Jamaica, Barbados, St. Kitts, and Nevis. By 1670, Virginia passed a law defining slavery as a racial status, which found many indigenes classified as colored, then Negro, then black. Enslaved Africans were always classified as black. Emory University has the most extensive database about the intra-American and transatlantic slave trade, called slavevoyages.org. How did they do it? They sent the men not lost in battle, prisoners of war, to different parts of the Americas, England, and Africa, while they, the Europeans, married the women, preferably from a royal bloodline, as we can see here with my colonizer lines, the Winstons and Taylors. The Winstons were captains that married into the Dabneys, my Pamunkey bloodline. Once they married into these indigenous bloodlines, the high sheriffs, colonels, captains, knights of the Golden Horseshoe, conquistadors, pretty much wealthy Europe joined forces to war with and steal from indigenes everywhere they went. One of the ways indigenous people got out of war and enslavement was to marry into Celtic bloodlines like the Welsh, Irish, and Scottish. They did this because the children would have the same status as the mother. If she was free, the children was free. If she was indentured, so was they, but not for life. My Marin seventh grandfather married my Welsh grandmother and chose to be colored instead of going to a reservation to keep a piece of land her family had taken over. That's just one of my bloodlines. All free people of color didn't mix and haven't until recently. So, with all these free people of color that own land and could read and write, the best way to enslave them was through contract. My grandfather, Zachariah, bound himself to the state of North Carolina in 1846 for $1,000 to marry Eliza. Today, that $1,000 would be a little over 41,000, which he was able to pay back because Abram and Cherry passed down wealth and land. When you couldn't pay it back, you became property of whoever you made the contract with for a set amount of years or life. Exactly how it is today with the prison system, and is exactly what happened to my second grandmother and her family. Her grandfather bound himself to the state in 1866, and by 1890, Allen and his children, including my grandfather Seth and his children, went from owning the farm to renting and becoming farm laborers or sharecroppers. The 1890s is when they started rewriting history, and as we can see with Allen and his son Seth, it took one generation to not be able to read and write and become a victim to debt and contract. What they don't want us to know is that so called black people also participated in the slave trade. Going back to my Malian grandfather, when he came to the mainland after having his son in South Carolina, he went to Alabama, bought some land, and was a slave owner in 1850. Now, at that age of 75, his son, grown and no other family, this was more than likely a caregiver who he didn't pay and paid taxes on. Go take a look at the Portland, Dallas, Alabama slave schedule of all those so called black folks that enslaved people, specifically Thomas Reeves, who had 47 slaves. When you have enslaved ancestors, it's hard to trace them past the 1870s. My two lines, the Longs and Littles, were enslaved. The Longs I traced back to Virginia, sold down to Alabama, and the Littles were enslaved Creek Indians William Winston stole land from when he, among others, founded Alabama the state. And this is how you get restitution, by doing your genealogy. It's on an individual family basis, and as we can see, I have a few claims. Find the bond or slave schedule, and you can sue the family, state, or corporation that wronged your family. The Great Migration is what sealed the deal for the complete colonization of our people. Leaving behind all the land and our culture of agriculture left my generation with not only a lack of sense of self, self-reliance, and where we come from, but when our greats went up north, they left behind generational wealth for the states, if they didn't eminent domain them or burn their towns down first. Now, to bring this all together and prove the things I said and how we are indeed Aboriginal, what if you don't have the indigenous American, Hebrew, or Moorish DNA? Let's talk mitochondrial DNA. Macrohaplogroup L is the root of all humans, the Eve gene, the first, the original. Its two subclades are L1 through 6 and LO. LO is who we now call the San Khoisan people. Pretty much in the beginning, Mama had 7 daughters. 85% of so-called African Americans is L2. The difference between L1 and L2 and the rest of the 5 is we practice agriculture while they were hunter-gatherers. L2 is so widespread and diverse, they don't know where we originated, but they do know is widespread in Africa, the Levant, and the Americas. In the study Reconstructing Ancient mtDNA Links Between Africa and Europe, They were questioning why is it so many L1 and L2 groups in Spain, Portugal, and Italy, where they found the origin of the genomes used in the study, majority of them came from the USA, inadvertently proving the American ancient link to Europe, like Jack D. Forbes wrote in his book, The American Discovery of Europe. There are 5 subclasses of L2. Others in our haplogroup include the Yoruba, Mandinka, and Bantu. Despite us all being similar genetically, we are all our own separate people. Think of mama having 5 children. L2A bloodline is Indigenous American, Hebrew, and Moorish, the third born to the first woman. The L3 bloodline is the creator of all non-Negro bloodlines. She is also the 8% of slaves brought here through the trade. And we have Henrietta Lacks to thank for the discovery of this bloodline. Native American groups belong to A, B, C, D, and X, along with Asians and Amigos. Amigos are Native Americans. The Celtic groups belong to R. The Dravidians or Hindus, who we now call Indians, belong to M. And modern Europeans belong to the very last set of people, H, V, J, and T. In conclusion, the quicker we get to the truth, the quicker we can pay our karmic debt and create a better America, which in turn creates a better world. The truth is, Kanye and them is right, and these people are winning. We all are getting played. There's no such thing as black and white. You are your mother's child, and L haplogroups was the first worldwide. In the next video, I'll go deeper into mtDNA, but until next time, bye.